What's up, everybody? There is a new champ on the block in the featherweight division, and that is one Ilia Topuria, who delivered one of the greatest title fight performances from a challenger that we have ever seen. Guys, now, I will gloat a little bit here, right? Here's a clip of a video that I made actually about a day before this fight took place, and I predicted exactly how Ilia Topuria was going to finish Alexander Volkanovski. Now, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. But if you've been around, you may have saw this video on my social media, and you've seen my breakdowns talking about the outstanding boxing fundamentals of Ilia Topuria. And if you did not see my X's and O's video breaking down this matchup in depth, guys, I called this, man. I said exactly what Ilia Topuria was going to do to put the nail in the coffin against Alexander Volkanovski in this matchup. Now, I will say, Alexander Volkanovski was looking very good in this matchup. This wasn't something where I know a lot of people were pointing out coming into this fight where Volkanovski got finished against Islam Makhachev. Was that going to phase him? Was that going to play some sort of role in this matchup with Ilia Topuria? And it was very likely that we were going to see a timid Volkanovski. But I had always made the argument, which I had seen out there from guys like Chael, they had always mentioned, if anyone is going to display that mental fortitude and grit to overcome something like that, it's Alexander Volkanovski. And I know a lot of people were doubting him coming into this matchup in terms of, the quick turnaround, and I never approached it that way. I pretended that he didn't even get finished by Islam Makhachev, because Ilia Topuria, I had been saying all along, is that good, ladies and gentlemen. He absolutely is. I made a video before anyone else on YouTube did talking about the boxing fundamentals of Ilia Topuria, and here's what Teddy Atlas actually said last night about Ilia's boxing skills, saying that he could beat pro boxers. I've said this man's boxing fundamentals are the best in all of MMA, not just the UFC, that we have probably ever seen. He looks like a professional boxer out there. The head movement, the timing, the countering. And after that first round, I know the commentators, and I wish I could turn the commentary off and just hear the crowd noise sometimes. They were very much like, I understand that, everyone likes Volkanovski, right? It's impossible to dislike Volkanovski. He's been a dominant champion. He's been fantastic. But Ilia Topuria was finding his groove, man. That's how a guy that is boxing-based approaches the fight. We see this with a guy like Dustin Poirier. We see this with a guy like a Max Holloway, where they're very boxing-based, like an Adrian Yanez, who's known for his boxing. They're very patient in the beginning of the fight. Now, Ilia starts very aggressive. He likes to put you on that back foot, move forward. As I mentioned, that is absolutely going to be the game plan. Keep Volkanovski on that back foot, where Volk more than likely was going to be willing to accept that in this matchup, especially in the earlier rounds, considering he knows the danger that Ilia presents in terms of the power. And Volkanovski was just scooting around on the back foot, firing off that lead leg, and he was trying to take a page out of Jai Herbert's book. Throwing the jab, throwing that high kick behind it. Ilia was more than ready for it, and I believe that actually shut down Volkanovski a little bit. I think that kind of started to mess with Volkanovski's head a little bit, because Ilia was so compact, so defensively tight. Any body kicks that Volk threw, anything to the head, Ilia was absolutely dialed in and ready for. And what did he do? He countered the kicks of Volkanovski that I mentioned in my X's and O's breakdown with that right hand. He started straightening it out. He started to counter, started to kind of earn Volkanovski's respect, started backing him up a little bit. He started working that lead leg of Volkanovski, which was absolutely brilliant of Topuria, because when Ilia is able to close you down and make you fight in that phone booth, I don't think there's anybody else in the division that can do that with him, where you get into that boxing exchange, firefight in close in the pocket. I don't think anybody beats Ilia in the division at that game. But what he did was brilliant, taking away the movement of Volkanovski, because those guys at City Kickboxing, well, I know Volkanovski trains at freestyle, but he still, goes over at City Kickboxing. He had Eugene Behrman in his corner. Those guys like Adesanya, Hooker, even Tyson Pedro now, and Volkanovski, they rely so heavily on movement, side-to-side movement, angle changing, cutting you off, which Volkanovski was doing a great job in the first round of frustrating Ilia Topuria, not being a stationary target like what we saw with Josh Emmett. This is something that Izzy pointed out prior to fighting Paulo Costa, where he's like, what happens when this guy fights somebody who's actually going to move and not just stand there and be there to be hit. And that's exactly what Volkanovski did in this matchup. He was sticking and moving. He was angle changing. But I don't think that he expected Topuria to implement those calf kicks like he did. It was absolutely brilliant because they were heavy leg kicks by Ilia. And what he did was chipped away at that lead leg. We kind of saw Alex Pineda use this on Izzy Adesanya. And I know you're like, well, why do you keep bringing up Izzy? And because Izzy and Volkanovski, they fight very similar. They rely on the jab, movement, and leg kicks. And they cut very good angles. And when you are not able to close them down and they're just able to skirt around on the outside, you're in for a long night, man. And that's exactly what Volkanovski has done to basically everybody outside of Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. But what he did, man, Topuria, this is one of the greatest performances we've seen from a challenger given the circumstances, because Volkanovski, he'll go down as probably the greatest featherweight champion of all time, man. Like, it's kind of hard to argue that. Everybody that he's beaten, he beat Max Holloway 3 times. I know people point at that second matchup where, yes, it was close. You could make the argument for Max, but we're going off of what the result actually is, which is Volkanovski beat him 3 times. And Volkanovski, not only has he beaten people, man, he has been absolutely dominant. The only time we really saw him face much adversity was when he took on Islam. And he took Islam to what people thought Volkanovski won the first time around. And then he steps in on short notice against Islam. And all of this is at lightweight. This isn't at featherweight. So when it comes into that type of conversation, it doesn't really factor in because those aren't featherweight matchups. And Ilia goes in there and did exactly what I was saying. He was not going to show Volkanovski much respect. And the commentators were not pointing out the fact that Ilia, after that first round, had made his reads and he started to get a groove. Guys, when you see someone that's boxing heavy and they start to kind of back up and they start to rub the nose with a hand, they start to kind of twitch a little bit, they let their hands down. We see it with Poirier when he grabs the shorts, runs the fingers through the hair. There's rhythm to this. And Ilia was doing that. He was stepping back, kind of getting a little extra movement in on the outside. He started to feel himself, man. He started to get that jab going. He knew he was working that leg of Volkanovski, and the whole goal was to take away that movement like we saw with Pineda against Adesanya. If you you don't need to come out right away and get the finish. Start chipping away at that leg. Start neutralizing their movement. Don't allow them to move so much, because the octagon, it's not in the apex. It's a giant cage. There's a lot of room to move around. And you could see in the beginning that Volkanovski's game plan was going to be to stick and move, obviously, beat up the leg of Topuria, and utilize that jab. And we saw Topuria beat up the leg, take away the movement, and then eventually he was going to look to close down Volkanovski, which is exactly what he did. And one of the issues with Volkanovski's, guys, is whenever he backs up, he likes to he keeps that right hand high, but his chin's in the air, and he turns just like this. And that was going to be the undoing in this matchup, because Ilia doesn't throw single shots unless he's throwing a jab. This guy throws in combinations, and his most devastating combination is right hand, left hook to the body, right hand over the top. And I said, guys, I'm gloating because I called this, man. In my X's and O's, I broke this down to a T of if Topuria was going to win, this is how he was going to do it. He was going to throw the right hand where Volkanovski's going to roll the hook to the body, and then he was going to crunch up like this, and the whole side of his head is exposed for that right hand, and there it is. Topuria lands it, rattles him, stuns him, and then throws a beautiful overhand right to sit Volkanovski down and knock him out. Guys, Ilia Topuria did all of the correct things leading up to this matchup to make himself what is going to be a superstar in the UFC. And I think coming into this matchup, I would say he was on the cusp of being a star, right? I mean, he's got the hook up here with Sergio Ramos, which, if people don't know who that is, this is a world-known soccer player. Like, these soccer players, man, they are world known all throughout the world. And Ramos has over 60 million followers on Instagram. Like, he's a very well-known athlete, and he's already been backing Ilia Topuria. He was there when Topuria fought Emmett. And, he's sending a message being like, good luck, Ilia. And then after Ilia wins the belt, Real Madrid makes a post on their social media. Keep in mind, 150-some million followers. A professional soccer club is behind this guy. Like, this man is by what he did, the documentary and all that, great. All the game that he talked, all of what he did, he put himself in a position to where if he went out there and did what he did last night, he was going to speed up the process and launch himself into the stratosphere of rather on the cusp of superstardom. I feel like we can all agree on that, because when we look at guys that in order to be a superstar, you need a couple things. You need, one, an exciting fighting style. You need to be able to be pretty good on the mic, and you need to be exciting, right? And you need to have the backing of other celebrities or other people that are like showing that support, where they're talking about you, they're posting about you, because all of those things are influence on the fan base, on the community. And Ilia has that, man. He had it before this fight. He called his shot. And obviously, if Volkanovski goes out there and beats him, it kind of all backfires, right? He looks like an idiot, but it's one of those situations where it's like a coach on fourth down. Like, if you go for it and you get it, you're a hero and you're a genius. And then if you don't get it, you're an idiot. What were you doing? You should have kicked the field goal. That was this situation for Ilia Topuria. High stakes. This man delivered, and not only did he deliver, it was beyond impressive. We've never seen anybody do that to Alexander Volkanovski. And I know Islam Makhachev went in there, caught him with a head kick. It was short notice. Volkanovski was not in a training camp. It was like a 10-day notice type of thing. This was a well-prepared Alexander Volkanovski. He looked sharp, man. Volk looked good in that first round. He was sticking and moving. I just think he was caught really off guard by the calf kicks of Ilia Topuria, which I cannot point out enough how brilliant of a strategy that was to neutralize the movement of Volkanovski, not allow him to be as quick laterally, be able to close him down up against the fence and box him in like Ilia Topuria did, and then eventually start rattling off those combinations. Because when you get someone like Ilia, who has outstanding boxing, who has really good power, he can't use that until he closes you down, right? I mean, he has a good jab, but when have you seen Ilia Topuria in the middle of the octagon really knocking people out, right? That's not exactly how that has happened. When he knocked out Jai Herbert, when he's knocking out Damon Jackson, these all happen along the fence. That is how this operates. It's like with Paulo Costa leading up to his fight, which I'll make a video recapping the whole event. He is a guy that has to close you down and work up against the fence. That's the way these guys work, man. And Ilia Topuria implemented a beautiful game plan. His strategy was on point. He was dialed in from the minute the fight started. This man, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a fighter and you are looking to build yourself into a guy with no weaknesses, watch this guy. Watch this guy, man. He has the best boxing fundamentals in all of MMA. He has really good low kicks. He was doing a pretty good job again. I know Volkanovski was landing some of those inside leg kicks, which they are annoying. They're more or less kind of like a jab, right? They're a little quick bop, the leg, and they do hurt after a lot of them, but it's not the same as taking an outside leg kick from the rear leg. It's not the same thing. When Topuria was landing, those calf kicks of Volkanovski sitting there throwing out that little switch kick, that doesn't have the same amount of punishment to the leg as when you're throwing that rear kick. Ladies and gentlemen, Ilia Topuria is the real deal, and I really think, I'm going to tell you in just a second who I would like to see him fight next in Spain. I believe that Dana White seems very adamant that the next move is going to be Ilia defending his belt. He didn't even rule out that this wouldn't happen in the Real Madrid stadium, is what it sounds like. This guy's, he's a superstar. He positioned himself to where if he got the job done the way he did, he was going to reap the rewards. He deserves everything that's going to be coming. He has the documentary that's coming out, which I'm going to be excited to see. This man, aside from this, guys, I'm not sure how you beat him, because you're not just going to take him down. We saw Volkanovski clinch up with him, and I know that a lot of the experts out there were saying, well, Volkanovski, he's going to have the strength advantage in the clinch. Maybe he could just take Topuria down and try to out-grapple him and ground and pound and look for an avenue that way. Topuria looked good in the clinch. He shucked off Volkanovski. Volkanovski landed a good shot in tight, but Topuria, man, he started throwing those hooks to the body, backed Volkanovski off. Ilia Topuria has sensational grappling, man, and the matchup that I would like to see next is if Yair Rodriguez could get through Brian T. City Ortega. I believe Yair Rodriguez versus Ilia Topuria is the biggest fight that they can make in the featherweight division outside of the Max Holloway fight. I know the Volk rematch is something that they could potentially do, and absolutely, Alexander Volkanovski absolutely deserves a rematch if he wants it. I would like to see Volkanovski take some time off. I'm not saying take some time off from training and things like that. He could get back into the gym whenever. I mean, that's on him. But I think in terms of competing, in the boxing world, when you get brutally KO'd, you take time off. You take about a year off. We've seen that. The old wisdom in the sport of boxing, that's kind of the method. You get brutally knocked out, you take close to a year off, if not longer. I know Volkanovski's 35 years of age. I would love to see him and Ilia run it back. I just don't know if that's what the UFC should do next, considering this is the first time we've had someone else in that championship seat outside of Volk for quite some time. And Yair, man, he said that he does not like Ilia Topuria. He was on the MMA Hour kind of, that there's that build up there. Yair's an exciting fighter. And if there's a guy, there's two guys that I believe present the most challenges to Ilia. And that would be Yair Rodriguez and that would be Max Holloway. Now, I know Max Holloway, I would say Max, but he's tied up to fight Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. And depending on how that fight goes, I don't know when we would see Max Holloway fight again. If he takes a lot of damage, it's going to be a while. If he gets it done and doesn't... I don't see a route in which Gaethje and Holloway both don't take any type of damage in this fight. I think it's going to be that kind of fight. So that's why I'm not saying Max Holloway. That's why I'm leaning towards Yair. But I do believe with the diverse skill set that Yair Rodriguez presents on the feet, he's long, he's tall. That's what gave Ilia problems against Jai Herbert, which that Herbert fight was also at 155. Keep that in mind. I believe that is the fire matchup that the UFC could make, considering it's in Spain. We have Yair with his heritage, being Mexican, and then we have Ilia Topuria. Like, the fan bases coming at that man. Those fan bases are as passionate as it gets for the sport. If you're ever talking about filling out 80,000 people inside a soccer stadium, you mean to tell me that they couldn't do Ilia Topuria versus Yair Rodriguez in Spain? That sounds like a gigantic fight, but it all depends on Yair getting through Brian Ortega. Ladies and gentlemen, Ilia Topuria is a stud, man. And like this video, comment your thoughts below on his performance. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate you all. See you next time.